If you're waiting for that reference check to determine if you should hire someone, you're doing it wrong. That's a
Yeah.
clear sign.
Welcome to Don't Tell Me About Yourself, the podcast where old school hiring meets a modern reality check.
I'm Lorna Erickson.
And I'm Victoria Gates, and we're the co-founders of Expert Interviewers.
Between the two of us, we've got 40 years of hiring experience. We've studied interviewing techniques. We've trained thousands of people globally to stop making the same mistakes over and over again.
And we've got 340,000 people following us online because apparently everyone has a story about a bad interview. You know the ones. The illegal questions, the 45-minute monologues, showing up late with no apology.
So every week, we're tackling the biggest subjects in hiring.
We bring real stories, real data, and real talk about how to make interviews actually work for everyone.
Because great hiring isn't luck, it's a practice skill. So whether you hire, apply, or just love a good interview train wreck, the show is for you.
Why do we still check references? By the time we get there, we've already been through multiple interviews, we've aligned as a team, hopefully, and we're ready to make an offer. So what are we actually trying to learn in that moment?
Yeah, because it's always positioned as this final validation step. But if your process has worked, you shouldn't need a validation step at the end.
Exactly. Is it actually adding information, or is it just making us feel better about a decision that we already made?
That's the real question. Are references useful, or are they compensating for something earlier in the process? We get to talk about it today. Let's roll. Let's talk about why this matters. It sounds like most companies are still checking references.
Yeah. I think the statistic I read was in the high 80s and 90% of companies are still doing it. And there's entire technologies that literally will do this for companies. So there's a massive industry and a market for it, for sure.
That's interesting. Like, we hear so much about technology in the interviewing process. I haven't heard as much technology as reference check technology, but it sounds like it's actually out there.
Yeah, it is. And what's funny is there's not really a lot of data supporting the positive things that references add, like predictability. Do they somehow help? It's not keen on why these are so valuable and contributing to the decisions that you're making. I don't know. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me.
It doesn't. It's actually a really low predictive value of how that person's going to do in the job. 13%, is that what it says here? It only explains 13% of the person's performance?
That sounds right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But there's not really like a ton of data on the positive side is what I was saying. Like I don't ever see people being like, we weren't going to hire that person, but that reference, wow. And then it's like, they were right. It's like, I don't know. I just like never hear of some astronomical win or why references, the predictability of the good side of references. I only hear the negative.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. I mean, we've always said this, and I think we have to say it early in this podcast, that reference checks to us have felt like a security blanket. It's kind of like we're going to add this in as the last step of the interview process, as validation, as risk mitigation, essentially. And is it actually serving that purpose? And based on the data that we just shared, it doesn't sound like it.
No, it doesn't. And when you say references are the security blanket of interviewing, it's giving check the box. It's giving, well, this is how we've always done, or a legal thing. Like, it's just not adding value. That's where I'm missing for it. It's like, if it's not impacting the decision or adding value, what are we doing here?
Right. So if it's not doing that, then like, what is it measuring?
Yeah. It's measuring if you know a few people that you can put down on paper that would maybe say some nice things about you. Do you have that? That's what it's measuring. It's measuring your networking, your circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. We need to start pinning some of these old scripts back up to next to our podcast ones. We had made a script back in the day about a reference check, and it's this person giving this other person an amazing reference check. And at the very end, they're like, I don't even know of Samantha. I hope she gets it though. You know, I'm not saying that happens a lot, but what I am saying is that you could be putting down your best friend as your last having them give you the reference. So yes, you have somebody that can say something nice about you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also saying like, well, are the people that you've put down also, are they responsive? Are they even allowed to say anything? I know that there was times in my career when I'd be called for a reference for somebody and I was only allowed to answer dates of employment. Like there are times where you're not allowed to say much. So it's really just very subjective and very much a highlight reel of these people's network, essentially. It's not really
Yeah.
measuring anything skill-wise.
You talk about only being able to verify their dates of employment and that's
Mhm.
it. Can you imagine how scary that probably was for the hiring manager thinking, "Oh crap, like I didn't do anything at the beginning of this interview process and now I have nothing but validated work dates? Like crap, what am I going to do now?" And that stresses me out for them. They
Yep.
were depending on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think about, so someone at this last company says these things about me, and I wonder if what they're going to say, is that transferable? Does that make sense in the context of like
Right.
where this new place? And I don't
Right.
know. I wonder, under a different manager with different team,
Right.
members, like, is that still accurate? Is that still valid? It feels like it's lip service in some ways, unless you have verification that it would apply.
And there's no way that the reference knows the candidate's potential new job
Right.
well. There's no way that they know the environment, the coworkers. Is this person going to be actually set up for success? They know nothing about what they're walking into. They're just stuck on speaking about a person's previous experience and is likely going to say something good about it anyway, 'cause they were written down in the first place.
Yep. I know we're talking about like the transferable nature of it, which I think is a factor, but there's also like
Mhm.
some other issues that we see. I know you were talking about a few. What are some of the other major issues that we see with references?
Yeah, not everyone has access to strong advocates. Can you just imagine working for someone who was very, very misaligned with who you were as a
Right.
person, and it wasn't a good fit, and that's the person you're supposed to write down to advocate for you? Like, you're
Yeah.
stuck. I mean, that's like a form of being stuck in your past work history for no good reason, and they just don't have the ability to give you that strong advocate. Like, that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think it does put a disadvantage for people that have been at jobs that have been crappy or have had bosses that have been not great, and not
Mhm.
great experiences. So you're kind of getting like double punched. You're getting punched because you had this crappy job or this crappy
Yes.
boss. And then on top of it, now this company's requiring references that don't even add value or contribute to the decision that they've already made. And we're saying,
Right.
okay, well, we're just going to give you kudos because you have access to people that will say nice things about you. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not measuring ability in any way. It's
Right.
literally just measuring who you know and if you
Yep.
have had good people in your experience that will speak about you. And it's
Yeah,
not a given.
exactly. It's like low signal. There's like little evidence if somebody's just giving you a date and a title. It's like, yeah, they
Mhm.
worked here from this to this. That is not going to help you at all. And it just goes to show just a lack of confidence in hiring managers. They're just saying, "Oh, I didn't get what I needed to get from the interview. I'm not fully sold, but maybe if I call this reference, it'll tip it over the edge for me and I'll hire this person."
Right, that's such a bias to me.
Right.
You're looking for someone to validate a decision that you're in the process of making, and it's like it makes me wonder how good your decision-making skills are if you need
Mhm.
a reference to validate your decision, and then I also think about, as a candidate, I'm gonna be like, "Okay," especially when they minimize it. Like, a lot of times in interviews, hiring managers just say, "We just need to reach out to a couple of your references and validate what you've done. Nothing serious." Like, they minimize it so much, and then it's like,
Right.
"Okay, well, if it's so minimal, then why are you doing it?" And then it makes me think as a candidate, is this how you operate? Do you do
Right.
a lot of things just to check the box? Do I wanna work at a place that does that? Do I wanna be
Right.
the one doing these things? It's like that sort of unintentionally provides a unique candidate experience where it might send
Totally.
them into not knowing if they wanna work for you.
Yeah, exactly, and didn't you get what you needed from me anyway? Like, we're here, we got to, like, the last step of the process. Like,
Yep.
let me speak for myself, don't let my former bosses speak for me. Oh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
And it seems like as far as references go, do we think anyone's ever gonna put down someone who's not gonna speak highly of them? Has it ever happened in the history of reference checks that anyone has literally checked one and it hasn't been positive in most
Right.
ways?
Yeah, no. No.
Right. It's ridiculous
It
because it's
is.
just how it is. It's basically like the perfect example of a stack the deck sort of,
It is.
and I honestly, it's one of the few things candidates have in their favor in some ways, so I'm hesitant to say, like, get rid of it fully, but I just think if the intentions are to help you make a decision or to make you feel good, reinforce
Right.
that positivity bias that you just talked about, Lorna, it's like,
Yeah.
then what are
You
we
know
doing here?
what's interesting though, a void of a reference can be held against a candidate too.
You're
Do
so
you I
right.
remember some hiring managers saying, "Hey, listen, you didn't get a reference from this person's job before their last job. Get one or else we can't hire them." I'm
Yeah.
like, "What?" And then you're basing it off of, like, I mean, the candidate could tell me, "Actually, my boss isn't even there anymore, like, they moved on."
Right.
And it's like, okay. It also means, like, a lack of a reference can also be a ding against a candidate, which is
Yeah, I
preposterous.
remember hiring managers being like, "Their boss won't get back to me." Like, what does that say? Like, they didn't like them enough to follow up, and it's like, "Hold on. You're gonna say that this person's bad communication skills is my fault as a candidate? Like, no, no,
Right.
no. That doesn't feel fair." So, it's not only that it can boost it positively, but what you're saying is, like, it can also be a negative, which feels like a trap. It feels
Yes.
unfair. Are you hiring the person who's giving the reference, or are you hiring the candidate? Like,
Yeah,
who are you going after? Because you're judging this person's communication skills, not the candidate.
totally. Ugh,
It's messed up.
gross.
It's so yucky.
Yep.
So if they're so bad, like we know they're bad, a lot of
Yeah.
people check them and they don't even ever really get anything that's gonna change their opinion. So why are people
Mhm.
still doing them from your
Yeah,
perspective?
it is fear-based, I know that, it's a security blanket, they need that warm fuzzy of like, "Oh my god, I knew I was so right, that this person's amazing, and they're telling me that they're amazing." That and tradition, I mean, it's a long-standing thing where we just need to know people's references and what they say about them. I remember when we worked for a company, and they were going to start making us check references for candidates when we already hadn't, because we're like, "All right, we're gonna really solidly invest in the interviewing processes and our confidence and our ability to assess
Mhm.
talent." And then they said, "Okay, recruiters, check references." And I was like, "What?" I am a I did not. Like, I did not check references, and then the people that did check references, I remember looking through their data because we could see everyone's data on the team. I remember looking through their data, and I remember bringing up the conversation, did these references change the outcome of any of these interviews?
Yeah.
Offers were gonna be extended, extra time, your recruiter's time or whoever's responsible for tracking these people down, talking to them for 15 to 20 to 30 minutes to verify this person's skills. Did any of that extra time and hours contribute to whether or not we hired this person? The answer was no. They hired them anyway, like no matter
Yeah.
what. So I'm like, this tradition is such a huge time waster for so many teams.
It is.
It just
Now,
needs to be reevaluated.
I do think there's instances where verifying if you're questioning a candidates we've talked a lot about, candidate fraud and, like, if
Mm.
you're questioning some things like that, I could see a reference being useful in those instances, and I do know that there are companies out there. I've worked with a few vendors, and I know there's other vendors out there, I will not name any names, that literally will do this in the background for you, where they will send out an
Mhm.
automated message to the reference, and they reply, and it just makes it very easy for the company. But
Yeah.
again, my question is, what value is that adding to your process? And if it's going to be a step to eliminate to validate that the person is saying that they worked where they did, right? I can understand in this day and age with some candidate
Yeah.
fraud and issues like that that could add value in some ways, not all the time, but it could. If you're just if it's just this automated message that's going out and no person is ever reviewing that information, then why are you doing it in the first place? Is kind of where I'm at.
Right.
If it's not
Yeah.
screening people out, if it's not adding value, what is it that we're doing here?
With anything else that we talk about, it's like pulling the curtain back. Is it actually working and is it not? And if
Mhm.
companies that are checking references, if 100% of the candidates are still getting offers anyway,
Yeah.
that's a concern. But I do hear you on the candidate fraud piece. That could be one additional way to combat that a little bit. Like, at
Yeah.
the very least, do these companies exist? It's like,
Yeah.
you can do some research on your own.
And that's valid. Like
Yeah,
where
that's
when you're working in a high volume recruitment role where you're recruiting for something at a high volume, you might need to. It might be a lesser skilled job. They might have some over, like I've had resumes as a recruiter where the dates don't match up and I'm like sus. And I'm
Mhm.
like, hey, this doesn't look right. And I just want to. So in that instance, I could understand where there's value there. But the
Yeah,
fact that it's a standard process that everyone does because it's the way it's always been done. Barf
right,
emoji. Like
right.
that is where I'm like, no, if you have a valid reason for references, I can understand it, but this mirage that we've been talking about of like it predicts performance, it can help me, it validates my decision, it
Mhm.
impacts our decision, and it's like that's where I'm like, but it doesn't because
Yeah.
there are things that do predict performance, and it ain't that.
Right. Yeah. And for the sake of asterisk legality here, I think that if you're gonna check the references for someone in your interview process, you have to check the references for everyone that's applying for that same
Totally.
job. It's you can't pick and choose, but if you have a couple candidates that the dates don't line up or you do need to validate employment or whatever it might be, then you should do it for the candidates that are still in the
Totally.
mix for that job as well. Yeah.
Yeah, across the board. But I think
Yeah.
it's about the intention behind it, right? I think that's really
Yeah.
what we're talking about at the root cause of like, are we checking a reference to validate our decision, to change our decision, to
Yeah.
predict job performance, to like, what are we doing here? Like, what, or are we just validating their dates of employment because the
Yeah.
types of positions or the type of industry that we're in requires that? I don't think many people understand the reasons behind what they're doing. We talk about that so much. So many companies aren't pausing, they're just automating processes or doing parts of their process without pausing to say, is
Yeah.
this piece of the process worth automating, worth continuing
Mhm.
to do? And that's what we're really looking at with references is like the
Totally.
intentions behind it.
Yeah. We're gonna ruffle so many feathers just by asking this question. People like to hold on so tightly to their traditions and how they run their processes, and this one's gonna hurt a few people because it's like their
I'm
their baby
fine.
blanket. They're like, "Don't take this from me. Like, I
I'm
need
fine with
this."
hurting them. I'm gonna rip that nook out of their mouth so fast they won't know what's coming for them, you know? Because we're saying that these aren't a good predictor of someone whether someone's gonna be a good fit historically, right? We're saying 13% of
Yeah.
the time. So what would you say what is a better predictor of performance if we're gonna talk about that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna
The
say this
better
isn't
predict
it. What is?
Yes, this isn't it. Yeah, if you're waiting for that reference check to determine if you should hire someone, you're doing it wrong. Your sign. I think that what does predict performance is everything that we describe as a green flag hiring manager in any of our social media posts or any of our podcasts here. And that's that the clear expectations up front and the structured, consistent interviewing. That's gonna help a ton. What else do you think is on that list?
The can they do the job, do they want to do the job piece comes to
Mhm.
mind. The structured interview and the consistent conversations make sense, and then when you're in those interviews, are you getting the information about can they do the job, and then do they want to do the job? That's the thing that's gonna predict performance,
It
not
is.
what their former boss that they put down to say nice things about them may or may not say or may or may not answer. Like
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it's funny because green flag hiring managers, we tell them not to take candidate opinions as evidence, right? I think
Right.
I can do this job, or I feel like I'm a really good manager, that we can't take that, but we're willing to take a references opinion.
Uh-huh.
It's so it's like
The
a green
math
flag.
ain't mathin'. It's
Exactly.
not. What are we
That's
doing
exactly
here?
it. So if you want what's actually going to predict performance, it's people's actual behavior in their last roles. It's just not
100%.
not going to work.
And structured
Yeah.
interviews, the things that we've listed, they are going to outperform that 13% predictor of job performance a million times, right?
Yeah.
Over. So if you're in the numbers game and if you're just into the data and just into odds, right? You're at the you're in Vegas, you're gambling. Are you going to sit down at a table where you have a 13% chance of winning
Mm,
or a 90% chance?
right.
I'm going 90,
I'm going
right?
90.
Every
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
So I don't see why we are relying on something that is such a lack of predictor, right? And accuracy.
Totally.
So I
Yes.
love your point about opinions,
Yeah.
but there's so many people that say like, "Well, I'll get to understand if they're a culture
Right.
fit." What do we say to those people?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, culture fit.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Another
Actually,
episode
get
for
me
that. We need
started.
another episode.
I need to know if they're a culture fit. Well, one, we discussed the reference that you're calling doesn't know your culture.
Yep.
Like they don't know if the person's going to be a culture fit for your culture. And then second, the person who's giving you that kind of rebuttal, it's like, I just want to know if they're going to be a culture fit. Cool, cool, cool. What do you mean by that? Let's define it, you know? And if we define it now and you didn't assess that during the interview process, why didn't you? And if it's not because you don't have the right information to do that,
Mhm.
let's talk about it. Here are some questions that you can ask that align with what you call culture fit right now.
Yeah. Seriously. Okay, what about the objection? I've heard this before of like, "Well, remember that hire last year? We almost
Mhm.
hired him, but we caught something in his reference. That saved us."
That totally saved us. Yeah. What's that saying that like a broken clock is right twice a day, you
Yes.
know? A blind squirrel finds the nut. I don't know how many more metaphors I can throw in there, but it's like neato. Luck
Mhm.
is not reliability, people, you
Yep.
know? You got
Yep.
lucky once,
Yep.
but how much time have you wasted since then that you'll never get
Seriously.
back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have been thinking about because knowing we were going to have this conversation, I have been thinking about when references might make sense, like because I do
Yeah.
think that they're potentially could be maybe a place for them, right?
And
Like
yeah.
I think about that and I think about where that might be. And as always, and we've talked about this with like lunch interviews or get to
Mhm.
know you over, whatever, drinks, dinner.
Yeah.
We've talked about that. There are certain things that for me, after you've made the hiring decision, if you're going to reach out to someone's reference to better understand how they were managed, how the relationship that they had and what they responded to so that you can then adjust your management and your team, performance together. Like
Yeah.
I think that is one place where it could be useful if you
Right.
are feeling like you need it.
Yeah. I I remember, and this goes along with what you're saying now, this example does. I remember I received a call about someone who, um, it was kind of a reference check, but instead they opened it up and said, "Hey, by the way, we have extended an offer to this person, and I just want you to know that we've already
Yeah.
extended an offer, and I just want to know what are your thoughts on how this person like works? How can I best support them in this job?" And I was like, "Ooh, like that's kind of nice. Like the
Mhm.
job is already theirs, and instead they were just calling me to ask how they could support that person."
That would be amazing if
Right.
more managers spent that amount of time and being intentional with their employees and planning that out. That makes me feel wonderful that that
Yeah.
person, what a lucky person that candidate
Right.
was to
Yeah.
potentially work for someone that cares about them in that way. That was a great use of it. But again, it's not prior to an offer or a
Mm.
decision being made.
Totally.
That's
And
critical.
I do hope, and this was a couple years back ago now, but I do hope that that company told my former partner that before they called me to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we're actually not calling to check your references to determine if we should
Right.
give you the job. Here's your offer, but we are
Right.
calling them to talk about how great you are and like ways that I can support you in this job."
Yeah. So
Like if
give
they
them a heads up. Like, who doesn't wanna
Right.
pick up that call? If I got that message from someone that worked for me, I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, of course, I'd love to help."
Yes.
Like, that sounds
Yes.
amazing, and it sounds like it's a much better experience for both parties and
Yeah.
actually adds value, which is
Adds
critical and
value.
important. So, I think we touched on this a little bit, but if we're gonna say no to references as a majority of the
Mhm.
rule, except for these, like, tiny cases that we're mentioning
Yeah.
here, if you're not gonna use references, you need to focus on clarity, we've talked
Yes.
about that, like, understanding what you're looking for, but what else?
Consistency.
Yeah.
I mean, that has been a common thread throughout, making sure that you're defining things consistently, but also putting candidates through a consistent interview
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, and then just the evidence that you've collected,
Right.
right, and comparing that, and that's it. Like, I think that that's pretty much that's where you need to spend most of your time because if you have all of that, then you shouldn't need reassurance. If you get to the end of the interview process and you're going, "I'm not sure, I need to hear from their reference on whether I should
Mhm.
hire them," then that's a sign that your interview was not good to start with, right? You didn't gather the
Right.
information that you needed, so that would be sort of an indication for me of what I would
Yeah.
we don't need.
That's an SOS saying, let's go back to one of these 3 things that we just talked about for
Totally.
sure."
So
Mhm.
are we saying references are dead?
Dead.
As a hiring tool, yes. As a security blanket,
They're still alive and well. Yeah, everyone's got their binky and their blanket still. Yeah.
yeah. Well, sorry to anyone whose feathers were ruffled today, but just hear us when we say if your interview process is good and you trust it, you
Mhm.
don't need them. We promise. We promise. We wouldn't lead you astray.
We would not. No, we would not. You got this. You don't need the references.
Mhm.
We'll help you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Happy interviewing.